I'd like to say good evening to everyone, and now we call to order the special call meeting for the Culpeper County Planning Commission. We welcome you here this evening, and the first order of business is going to be the approval of tonight's agenda. So we have that before us. Is there any questions? Or if not, Chair entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, this agenda is approved. Before we go to our old business, and Sam, we just, and I have this privilege and opportunity, I'm not going to be here next Wednesday when we have our regular meeting, but I do want to take the time out and thank Brother Nate and Brother Doug for the work that you all have done with us. As your chairman, you've definitely contributed, and your contributions have been appreciated, and some of the major tasks that we had accomplished during your time here. The board had some better opportunities and information to make the decisions that they had to make because of your input. So we thank you and wish you the best in your endeavors, okay? All right? Thank you. Yes. Yes, yes. At this time, we now go into our old business. So, and let me explain before you go, Sam, that this is a special call meeting, and from a standpoint of a work session, that we can have the opportunity to make our final decisions, hopefully tonight on the item of old business that we had before us. So there is no public hearing. The public hearing, of course, was closed last week, and but the Planning Commission will be able to ask any questions and moving in that direction. So, Sam? And Sam, before we go to, this will be your last meeting really with us as the...
Next week.
Well, next week would be
Well,
the
actually
last.
January,
Okay.
but I may kick it over to Mr. Cooley before, so.
Okay, all right, Mr. Cooley. Nice to have you come aboard with us. We've seen your face before, so we'll get past the introductions on that part of it. But, well, it'd be my last time seeing you until January. So, but anyway, we'll take it from there. Okay? All right, all yours, Sam. Old business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we do have one item on the agenda tonight. It isn't, it is an old business item. And of course, it's potential amendments to Article 3 and Article 4, which is our A1 and RA zoning, and then, of course, your subdivision ordinance, as relates to subdivisions in those two zoning districts. The Planning Commission, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, had a public hearing on November 20th, prior to Thanksgiving, and comments were received. Hopefully, the Planning Commission were able to take those in, listen to those, you know, and move along in your thought process as we consider these draft amendments. Nothing has changed since the November 20th meeting or since your October 16th work session either. On October, you all met for the first time to review what the board sent down and what staff had drafted in response to that motion that came out from September at the board meeting. And on the screen kind of highlights those potential changes that you all are reviewing and been asked to review and consider. And just as a reminder, it would be an increase in minimum lot size in the A1 zoning district from 5 acres to 10 acres. Be an increase in minimum lot size in the RA district from 3 acres to 6 acres. Same division requirements potentially for anything that doesn't have the requisite amount of road frontage in each zoning district, and that's 10 acres, and that's been the case for a number of years. Minor divisions as currently drafted still would be allowed, but also potentially creates a rural cluster option as well. Would be a new section that does not exist in today's subdivision ordinance. Would identify, basically be based on a 10-acre density, so if you have 100 acres, you could get 10 lots. 2-acre minimum lot size for that. Originally drafted at 70% open space requirement for that open space part that would be deed restricted from further future development. Planning Commission made a recommendation at your work session for 50%. That's what you see highlighted in red there, as well as the 50% of the use of the road frontage. That was a thing that was potentially reduce, or a suggestion by the Planning Commission to reduce that as well. In the subdivision ordinance, let me use the right tool here. In the subdivision ordinance, potentially would also be a new section for road standards if the rural cluster were to go forward. And you kind of see that at the bottom of the screen here. They would start basically if you have 2 or more lots. So if a single lot for a single driveway, that's not going to apply, but anything over 2 would, and then there's a separate standard for anything beyond 5 lots. Planning Commission in the work session in October, you all suggested eliminating the requirement for an engineer certification for that process due to the expense that would be behind that and encumber, basically someone from moving too quickly and also incurring quite a bit of expense potentially with that as well. This would be the section, if adopted, for that minimum road standard. And it is a minimum road standard, and it just establishes that normal easement width, a total clear width, a vertical clearance, a minimum road width of 14 if you're looking at more than 5 lots. 16 feet there. Road base with a 6-inch aggregate for your subgrade, and then some type of 2-inch smaller stone on top or hard surfacing if you choose to do that, with some shoulders and of course minimal grading requirements. And again, that would be a new provision in the subdivision ordinance that does not exist today. Planning Commission suggested, as I mentioned, eliminating the engineering certification requirement. Also, there was a section there in point 4 about not issuing building permits, and I believe, based on the work session, the Planning Commission also suggested potentially eliminating that provision as well. Standard would still be there, it just wouldn't be tied to a certain number of building permits. Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to go through these examples. You've all seen these several times, but I'm just going to pop the proposed stuff back up, and I'll stop there tonight. Planning Commission was charged in September, as I mentioned. Your first official meeting through a work session was October 16th. The Planning Commission, according to state code, has 100 days to consider a matter like that, so you all have more time than tonight. If you choose to, you can go up until, I believe, the way I calculated, January 24th, of next year if you choose to do that. You can also make a recommendation tonight, and then as the board receives whatever recommendation you move on, they'll decide how to move from there. The board does at least have to have at least one public hearing themselves, a minimum of one public hearing before they can enact any ordinance changes based on whatever your recommendation is. So I'm happy to entertain any questions. We're here to make suggestions or revisions and take your recommendation.
Thank you, Sam. We have the commissioners. We've heard the reading and what Sam has shared with us. And we visited this many times and have really dealt with this in an effort to make sure that our community, all the citizens that were involved, were mailed and information so that they could be aware and come and give their input. And I think we had a really good public hearing on last week, and very beneficial. And at this time, we are tasked with making a decision as to how to move forward. So, anyone who has any questions or any discussion at this time, that floor is open to you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have a couple things for staff. Thanks, Sam. The proposal that the board has asked us to consider includes the time-based method that is being challenged in court right now.
Correct.
Do you have any idea what the status is of the court case, how many months it may be before resolution has come out?
Yeah, I believe there has been a partial ruling on the demurrer as far as that goes, but the full ruling hasn't been finished yet. So I don't know exactly how long that would be. So.
Do you know if either side could appeal the ruling?
Sure. That could
Okay,
happen
so
too.
if this ordinance were adopted by the board to include the time-based method, and then the ruling strikes down the time-based method, then what impact would that have on the the ordinance?
We would have to evaluate based on that ruling, of course, and then the board may have to pivot, off of it altogether, and we'd be looking at redrafting something. But that may not be the case either, so. It's just,
Okay.
unfortunately, it's unknown at this point, so.
All right, then, one other thing is, one concern that was mentioned by a number of local residents at the public hearing a couple weeks ago was that this would represent a taking. Do you know if the county attorney has made any opinion for the board on whether it does and what kind of legal ground the county would be on if it were to be challenged? And my point is, if the legal foundation is uncertain and we go forward and this ordinance would be adopted, then the county should know whether or not they would be likely to hold up in court or not.
Right, Commissioner Price, I get the gist of what you're asking. Of course, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to be able to evaluate a full legal risk of what we're doing in that light. To answer your first question, the county attorney, to my knowledge, has not made any finding on a takings on that. I heard you say that. I heard a number of people say that, of course, at the public hearing too, so I'm sure it'll weigh on the board's mind, and of course, the county attorney as well. In that vein, she has seen these drafts. They've been out for a couple of months, and I've not heard anything negative about moving forward as far as legal problems. So.
Okay. That's all for me right now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Thornhill?
Okay, I think that we have discussed this in depth and in length. I think that we had a public hearing where we had over 200 people in attendance. We had 48 people that spoke. Only 6 of them, or 7 perhaps, were for it. The rest of them were against any change. We have turned in a petition that had 178 signatures on it from landowners that were impacted, that were perhaps at that meeting but did not want to speak. So we have been massaging this, as you said, since October. At this time, if we are ready and we have no one else that wants to speak, I want to make a motion.
Is there anyone else who would like to? I want to speak. Go ahead.
I have a question for staff. I'm going back to maybe when we last spoke in October. I missed the last meeting. So I'll stick to the minimum lot size question first. It's still sticking in my craw about how there's no further description of a change in road frontage for the increase from 3 to 6 acres and 5 to 10.
Right.
Because back then I described there's a conflict that you have a lot proportion of 5 to 1. But if you go with up to 6 acres, that's a 1,300-foot lot.
Yeah.
And you said at that time, and anyway, it exceeds the 5 to 1 ratio. The 10-acre lot would have to be 1,742 feet long. So you said, well, you wouldn't be able to do that lot.
Right.
So we've created a minimum with basic parameters that, so you're banking on a big percentage of these that people that may want to use up road frontage, that they're just not going to happen because they're caught between the proportion and how to get there, what you supposedly have given them in the new language. So what's,
If they
where are we
choose
going
to,
here?
if they choose to use the minimum road frontage, yes. That 5 to 1 standard, unless that's modified as well, will still exist.
So in other words, they would just need more frontage
Correct.
and to get it down another, each one, you need to get it down another 300 feet.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Then I'll just I'll skip real quick for now to a cluster option question. I missed the last meeting, so how did the discussion go to get from 70%, 70-30 to 50-50? I thought 70% was pretty good, and it was a real commitment to create a larger lot conducive to supporting agriculture and view sheds, et cetera. And so I'm wondering how the conversation went here and how the commission reached 50%.
I think that we talked about the 50% because it's a taking of, you're giving the county 70% of your land and then 70% of your road frontage in order to obtain a cluster. The
What do you mean
length
you're giving
of,
the county? I mean, that
Well,
becomes
you're
a
a-
lot to be owned by an individual. It's
You
not
are.
free space. It's
Right.
It's as ownership.
right. And the likelihood of someone being able to, as you just pointed out, create any of this is very difficult. The length of the road was limited to 2,500 feet.
Well, no, wait, I was talking minimum lots. Now we're bouncing over to cluster question.
Well, that's what the 70%, that's when that kicks in, is when you cluster.
No, but the minimum lot, I'm talking about 6 acres and 10 acres on the road. Those, you could do those time-based right now. I mean, if that part was
Right.
passed, you'd walk out the door and say, well, I can't do 3 anymore, but I can do 6.
Well, you can't do anything if you're if you're reserving 70% of the road frontage. Road frontage is golden. It is very difficult, as you just even pointed out. Road frontage, very few parcels have enough now to make 250 feet or 200 feet of road frontage for the current cuts.
But you're not putting your whole cluster on the road. You're building road into.
Right, and that road then was also, as I just mentioned, limited to 2,500 feet. And if you took 2-acre parcels and measured a square and went down, it takes more than 2,500 feet to get them in there.
Now, per staff today, talking to Neil, you can make your cluster off the road,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
as long as, so does
Commissioner
that
Burton,
still
I-
have the road limit
Commissioner
extension?
Burton, if I may, you know, part of the, I don't understand necessarily the full justification of going from 70 to 50, but based on the comments that I heard on October 16th, it was basically to allow flexibility, a little more flexibility. Forcing it at 70, you know, this is an 80% actually example. You can achieve that if you have smaller lots and you have the right amount of soils in that particular area, you know, that type of thing. But if you go to like a 50% model like you see on the screen now, it would afford, you know, larger lots, a little less open space, but a little bit larger lot that you may need to be able to accommodate the soils of the property, for example, or, you know, or things like that. So I think the intent was just to allow a little more flexibility with design. Still have some type of open space to get that cluster development, but allow a little more flexibility. But you can accommodate, you know, that the 50%, if you choose to do that, you can still exceed 50%, right? The way the ordinance would be drafted, so.
All right. I'll make another comment, just depending on how our conversation goes, but I've always been trying to figure out a way why clusters were a good idea. But what makes me pause the most on even agreeing with it is because, one, was it a salve for a time-based problem? Well, that lawsuit's in motion, it's going, it's active, someone's gonna win, someone's gonna lose, someone's gonna, that's separate from this decision. So, and then secondly, another home builder association from a major city nearby came all the way to that meeting to tell us how great this cluster option was and that we should really do it. So I'm not so sure that that whole tool, unless we really work on it or at all, is just gonna accelerate, is gonna work against our goals and the board's goals to preserve more open space or limit rooftops or anything. So I'm gonna pause right there for now.
Anyone else say it?
Yeah, so I guess, to me, it comes back to the changing the acreage size, right? So if we're going to 5 acres or 10-acre parcels, let's just say you had a 100-acre parcel and you did 10 10-acre divisions, right? Then, as opposed to 10 5-acre divisions, as it is now, let's just say, then you're going to leave more agricultural land available by taking less acreage. And so I don't necessarily know if that's in conformance with the comp plan, because the intent is to keep it more rural and to have more agricultural land. But by increasing the size of the acreage, we're actually taking more of the land from the agricultural use. So if someone did want to sell the property for whatever reason they wanted to do it, then they're going to be forced into selling a larger chunk and taking more of their farm away. So I don't know that that really, it doesn't set well from my perspective. And in my mind, that is impacting property rights and things like that. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I guess I'll go back to where I started this whole discussion. I don't see the problem we're trying to fix. It seems to me like we're taking away property rights without any good rationale. We've listened to the public, and the vast majority are opposed to this. We talked about possibly, maybe we're doing this to save farmland and so forth. But, I mean, this seems like a wrong way to do this. We've given away thousands of acres in data center land and solar farms, and nowhere near the amount of land we're talking about here. The population issue, I think we said that, the current situation allows for smaller developments, allows smaller builders to be involved in it, allows a lower cost of housing for the people, as opposed to we're looking at, things bringing in 700 houses to the place, and we seem to be considering that. So it seems like there's a great dichotomy as to what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going about it. Again, I just think that based upon those situations, and again, the vast majority of public's opposition to it, I would be opposed to this.
Anyone else? Okay, no other discussion.
I'll just say, I agree with Mr. Kilby. That's what I heard at the meeting, and that's what I've heard on the street, and that's what I've heard at 7-Eleven, is people who really have the land now in agricultural use are like, why are you making me take more than I need to out if I want to pass it on to family or sell it, or you have my right to sell it? So I'm not sure going to 6 and 10 acres is the right thing at all.
So I will say, and it's no shocker, I'm the resident token supporter of agriculture. I don't think that this is the answer. I think if that's what the board's goal and initiative is, I think they need to revisit it and figure out a different way, because I don't think that this is the answer at all. And I just, as is and as presented, there's no way that I can support that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could. There was a meeting we had here where I asked Sam directly and staff that said, is this going to solve, do we see this as a problem right now in our county? And correct me if I'm wrong, but the answer was no. And I said, are we forecasting this, doing this to solve the growth problem? Is that going to be a future problem? And the answer was no. So I'm not, what's this, our 4th meeting, I believe, on this subject? It keeps getting kicked back to us. We've given them a clear message that we don't think it's a good idea. I mean, this is, I don't understand. I'm at a loss. I don't support taking those rights. I don't, 50% versus 70%, like you said, it has the opposite effect of the desired outcome. So yeah, it's just, I'm not sure why we keep getting it kicked back to us after we've said no 3 other times. So that is my opinion on this.
Okay, sir. Anyone else? Being none, Chair entertain a motion.
Okay, you ready? Excuse me. I would like to make a motion that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the potential amendments to Article 3, the A1 and the RA zoning districts of Appendix A of the County Code, as well as Appendix B of the County Code, be denied. We do not support the proposed changes. We want to leave it as is for now. If they want to go back and study it, they can.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Being none, all in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Okay. It will be sent forward to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of a denial. Is there any other items? Sam, do you have anything else?
No, Mr. Chairman, just a reminder, we do have our regular scheduled meeting next Wednesday on December 11th.
Okay. Any other discussion? Being none, Chair entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.